Mexican flour tortillas. In the bowl I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Then I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon plus 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking powder and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. We're going to mix this all together. Once you have made this recipe, you are going to dread having to eat this stuff from the store. It is so delicious, so soft. Okay, nicely mixed. Then I'm going to add some fat. I like butter flavored Crisco. Just cut it in a little bit. We're gonna form this into something like cornmeal, as if you were making pie crust, blending the fat into the dry ingredients. Some people use butter, regular Crisco, lard, bacon grease. This is 1/4 cup of butter flavored Crisco. And yes, this is real bacon fat. So it's a long story. My husband and my children love the burritos at Alberto's in San Diego. That's why I'm making this video, because I stumbled upon the most delicious flour tortillas, the Mexican variety anyways. Now I'm from Guam and we have our own version of flour tortillas. We call it Tortillas, and it is highly likely that our Tortillas was created based on the Mexican tortillas. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago, Guam was settled. Oh, I don't know about settled, but we had people from many countries come through Guam on the Manila trading galleons, including folks from Mexico, the Philippines, China, and Spain. And a lot of our Chamorro foods are very similar to Mexican foods. However, on Guam, we don't have a recipe for something like the Mexican tortilla. Our tortillas is very thick, sweeter, and uses some type of milk, more butter, more baking powder. At any rate, this is done. So I have 2 cups of water that I'm going to bring to a boil in my microwave, then use a fork to incorporate the water into this dry mixture. So this looks good. I'm going to make a well, then grab my water. Pour some of that boiling water in the middle, and then just use the fork, you don't want to burn your fingers, to bring the mixture together. The original recipe I started with had way too much salt and baking powder. It was not palatable. Well, I've experimented some already. This is the most luxurious, softest, supple dough you will ever work with, at least that I have ever worked with. It feels so wonderful. It's awesome and amazing. Once the mixture is cooled down some, I'll use my hand. A little bit water, a little bit of the water at a time. See, it's coming together. I don't care much for flour tortillas of the Mexican variety, but this recipe, it's amazing. And I don't use the word amazing very often. Water. So what's going to happen is we're going to knead this a tiny bit, form a very soft dough, and then divide it into 12 portions and set the dough aside to rest for an hour under a moistened kitchen towel. Then after about an hour, we'll roll it out and cook it. Cooks very quickly because you're going to roll the dough into very thin tortilla. Oh, look at that. And keep the cooked tortillas in a tortilla warmer. The one you could buy at your local kitchen supply store, you know, Bed Bath & Beyond. I've seen them in some grocery stores. And those tortilla warmers actually work. So I'm going to knead this a little bit. Then roll it onto a lightly floured surface. Portion it out. And keep busy for an hour until it's ready to cook. I'm doing this right on my countertop. And when I cook and roll the dough out, I'll do that right next to my stove. It's just a lot easier to transfer it from my surface, my work surface, to my cast iron skillet. So I kneaded this some already. I'm just going to roll it out and portion it into 12. You can roll it evenly. That looks decent. Okay. Got my container here. It also has a cover. Use something sharp to divide the log into half portions, then each portion into thirds. Now some balls will be a little bigger than the other. This is going to make 12 tortillas. Alright, and then each ball of dough, each section in half again. Roll it into a ball a bit. Doesn't have to be perfect, and put it in your container. The dough is still warm. I love this. Now I only roll this out just before cooking to about an 8-inch tortilla. My cast iron skillet is not big enough to make burrito sized tortillas. Traditionally, people use a comal, which almost looks like a big dinner plate that you can use on the stove with a handle. A well-seasoned cast iron skillet works very well to cook your tortillas. We are going to have steak tacos with homemade tomatillo salsa. Okay, so here's my collection of dough balls. I should have 12. Now, we'll let this rest. It's still a bit warm. And I have already moistened a kitchen towel. White would have been nice, right? But it's clean. And then I'm going to set it over. You know what, first let's clear this off so I don't get too much flour on my towel. Okay. So set a wet kitchen towel over, and actually if you wrap it, it will stay off of the balls of dough. Then just place the cover on. Don't use a wet paper towel because it'll dry out and your dough will not be as soft. Set this aside for an hour and then we get to cook it. Okay, so here I've got my ball of dough that I pulled right out of the container. Just a little bit of flour on the rolling pin. You just roll and turn. And I have some counter space towards my left here, which is where I'm going to finish rolling this out. That way I'm as close to my pan as possible. So I'm going to move over here. Oops. And I want to roll this as thin as possible, and you should be able to start to see my countertop, or your countertop, underneath the tortilla. It's more of a rectangle than a circle. The heat is just under medium, and it takes about 45 seconds, so you can count to yourself for 45 seconds. You notice the tortilla will start to bubble, the edges will start to dry. You'll notice the surface also begins to look dry. Look at the big bubble there. You've got the fat that's in the dough. As it melts, releases the moisture, creates steam, thus the bubbles. Let's check the bottom here. Okay, good. Oof. Can you hear it? And of course, while you're waiting for this to cook, you can roll out another tortilla. I have my tortilla warmer standing by, so I can get this in there. And there you go, it's done. Alright, I'm going to stay in one spot just to make this a bit easier. Obviously, I'm not an expert Mexican flour tortilla roller, but it works. It's good. About 30 seconds this time around. As you cook your tortillas, your pan gets hotter, so just be careful it doesn't burn. The tortillas don't burn. The dough is so thin it doesn't take a long time to cook. Of course, you can lower your heat if you feel that it's browning too fast on the outside before it cooks through. I wasn't going to try one until dinner tonight, but I couldn't help it. I gave in. So this is how thin it is. At first it's a little crispy once you cook it, and as it softens, when kept in the tortilla warmer, it will soften up all the crispy parts. But it's so delicious. Just the right amount of fat, right amount of salt. You have to make this. I promise you will not want to buy the store-bought tortillas anymore. Yummy.